You have been selected to attend Badger Boys State by your teachers, counselors, because you've demonstrated academic achievement coupled with leadership qualities that set you apart from other students.
When I was accepted to attend Badger Boys State, I was happy. I was really excited to be able to participate in something that obviously has been a staple of Wisconsin for a really long time.
So you can be a friend all week.
What I think this week has in store for me is hopefully a lot of learning.
You're about to embark on a week that is life-changing. So I tell you, make the most of it. It is now my privilege and honor to declare the 77th session of Badger Boys State officially open. Thank you.
So you've heard this week about a week to change a lifetime. You've heard about Forward the Legacy. But right now, we're going to talk about the nuts and bolts. We're going to talk about the basic facts of life here at Badger Boys State. So number one, you're going to try to run as a unified party. You're going to select candidates.
The first couple days sets up the structure, and then, as the old saying goes, the program runs itself.
Just now, we went over all the basics of what we're going to be doing this week with all the governments. We went over the different positions you can run for this week and how you're going to have an impact on what's going on. It's going to be our peers that are making changes. It's people that we know and support, and this is in the hands of us to make changes, not the hands of adults.
Respect, absolutely. There are lots of different people here, and even though all of you live in the state of Wisconsin, you don't all come from the same communities. Some people come from rural communities. I know when I got here, I grew up in Milwaukee, and when I got to Boys State and I was thrown into my city, one, I was the only African American kid in my city. Two, I met farmers. I never met anybody that farmed in my entire life. And we had a wonderful experience getting them knowing about my life in Milwaukee and me learning about their life on the farm.
Over the next week, I'm really looking forward to not only growing as a leader, but also growing as a person and just meeting so many like-minded people. These are just great guys here, and I'm really looking forward to making friends with them and really keeping in touch with these great people in the long run of my life.
All right. Fill in the arrow for whichever candidate you want for that section, all right?
Oh, you're going to complete the arrow by drawing a line from the back to the front.
I think every successful gubernatorial candidate has a story. I have now seen 2 other governors win after me. They both had incredible stories. Getting into like complexities and
You have been selected to attend Badger Boys State by your teachers, counselors, because you've demonstrated academic achievement coupled with leadership qualities that set you apart from other students.
When I was accepted to attend Badger Boys State, I was happy. I was really, really excited to be able to participate in something that obviously has been a staple of Wisconsin for a really, really long time.
So you can be a friend all week.
What I think this week has in store for me is hopefully a lot of learning.
You're about to embark on a week that is life-changing. So I tell you, make the most of it. It is now my privilege and honor to declare the 77th session of Badger Boys State officially open. Thank you.
Throw some balls.
The three most destructive words that every man receives when he's a boy.
gonna go blow my nose.
It's the only one I'm going to get all week. So I don't know if it truly is that this part. I mean, I've been like that. I just got. So my adrenaline's going all through this. Okay, totally. I'm going to be really. Good. All right. I have to correct everything they just wrote. Hey, Gary. So, okay. Please rise. Color guard against the colors of our nation. Don't worry, I'm making all sorts of changes for you. Yep.
Those lights aren't turned off. Us normal-sized people,
Oh,
there's
right.
one heck of a glare.
What's
The
that?
tall guys didn't
They don't.
have a
They don't
problem.
see it, and that's
Yeah,
why we
but
set it up that
yeah.
way, right? I'm gonna chair up here. Please rise. Color guard, advance the colors of our country. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Please be seated. I'm Eric Weiss, the Dean of the Law School here at Badger Boys State, and in that role, it's my responsibility, nor really my pleasure, to announce to you the results of the bar exam and to swear in our newly appointed attorneys at Boys State. If you attended the Badger Boys State School of Law, please stand. gives me great pleasure to announce that each and every one of you passed today's bar exam. At this time, we will swear you in as new attorneys at Badger Boys State. So if you would please raise your right hand and repeat after me. I swear or affirm that I will uphold the Constitution of the United States, the state of Wisconsin, and of Badger Boys State, that I will carry out my Badger Boys State pledge, and that I will faithfully and to the best of my ability perform the duties of attorney. Congratulations, you now may begin your service. This week, we talk often about the transformation each of you make into adulthood. We ask that you go back into your communities and you use the tools that you've been given here as a driving force for change. But too often, we don't have an honest conversation about what it means to be a man. And tonight, members of our staff are going to start that conversation about manhood and about healthy masculinity. Please join me in welcoming Blake Eben, Derek Collins, Mike Kolarchik, Corey Roseth, and Bob Chappelle to the podium this evening.
Be a man. A simple phrase, one that we've all become accustomed to hearing since our early days on the schoolyard playground. But have you ever stopped for a second and thought to yourself what those three words actually mean? My name is Blake Eben, and today we're going to talk about what it truly means to be a man. For many, their idea of what it means to be a man has connotations that trap them within a box of what it means to be a male within our culture. Drive a truck, eat meat, play sports and have guns, be good with tools and have no fear. These are just a few examples of what men of every age feel their role to be as a male within our society. But let me be clear, it's important to note that individually these characteristics are not bad, and we cannot forget that. The problem, however, comes in when men become trapped in these ideas of what it means to be a man and are unable to see past them. They feel that their masculinity is somehow tainted if they don't align with these labels of what it means to be a man. For example, men trapped within this box feel their masculinity to be less in caliber if they drive a Prius when compared to a man that has a lifted truck based solely on the vehicle that they drive. Men in this box will feel that they are less of a man if they order a salad compared to a greasy cheeseburger. Men in this box will feel that they are less of a man if they cry when others are around. Men in this box are afraid to accept themselves for who they truly are. And you don't just have to take my word for it either. Leaders of a school-based club called Stand Up posed this very same question to the entire 9th grade class at Appleton North High School. The students were asked as a class what it meant to them when they heard the saying, "Act like a man." As the students began to respond, they wrote down all of the words that the students said and made a list at the front of the room. Take a look at the list they developed on what "act like a man" meant to them. Things such as don't be whipped, dominate, Be the head of the household. Be in charge. Don't ask for help and show no emotion except for anger are all things that these students thought of when someone told them to man up. Many will say that these 3 words, be a man, are the 3 most destructive words that any man will ever hear. And I'd have to agree. As a child, I was very sick. Going through a variety of operations, I felt like I visited the hospital and doctor's office more often than I visited my own elementary school. Like many of you, I excelled in the classroom, but I was unable to transfer that success onto the playground. As I recovered from a variety of different illnesses, my body would easily tire while at recess, which many of my classmates viewed as a sign of weakness and that I was less of a man because of it. So in 2nd grade, when the opportunity presented itself, I began playing Pop Warner football. Naturally, being 6'4" now, I was taller than most everyone else my age, so the game came quite easy to me. At first, I began playing only in an attempt to cover these weaknesses. As the years progressed, my love for the sport began to grow, but with it came the forging of a very strong man box. I fit the stereotype. I used manly sports to cover my weaknesses. And some of the men that I share this stage with tonight have also discovered this extremely limiting man box, either within themselves or amongst the circle that they associate with. Coming from different backgrounds, generations, and walks of life, all of us on stage live very different lives. But the stereotypes, the ones found within the man box, transcend all of our differences. Let's take a moment and hear the stories of what being in the man box was like for them, and then we'll transition, as shown on the pyramid on the slides, into how we were able to overcome these limitations that we speak of in the man box that were placed on our lives. And we ask that you hold your presentation, or your applause, between each transition, and we'll get started.
For the first 22 years of my life, I lived inside the man box. This wasn't a decision that I had carefully considered or thought much about. It came naturally to me. Being a tall white man with broad shoulders, a deep voice, and athleticism allowed me to hide an important truth, a truth that I kept buried deep inside. It was a truth that I hoped would never get out. It was a truth that I had suspected since childhood and hidden for just as long. The truth was, I'm gay. Even though I was not ready to come out until after college, I devised a plan when I was in high school. I surrounded myself with friends who I thought would be there for me when I was ready to start being open about my sexuality. For the most part, this plan worked. I had wonderful friends who I knew I could count on in a time of need, even though I wasn't yet comfortable enough to lean on them regarding my secret identity. I think it was the assumptions and the comments that they made about me that encouraged me to maintain that act. Hey man, I'm going out with this girl and she has a friend for you. Want to come with? Or, dude, that girl over there is so into you. Are you going to make a move? I never bothered to correct my friends because I felt good about their comments. From my point of view, I was passing as straight, and that was just fine with me. What I didn't fully appreciate until the end of college is that I was relying on stereotypes to make myself feel better. Since I didn't fit the stereotypes of what I thought to be a gay man, I was able to stay undercover, to stay hidden behind my mask. In public, I would argue that everyone should be treated with kindness, care, and respect, regardless of their color, creed, or sexuality. But in practice, I was playing into the hand of heteronormativity. By not being myself for fear of the unknown, I began to understand I was not truly a part of the solution. That made me a hypocrite. Some identity markers are visible and some are not. People with visible differences cannot hide those differences, so I thought I shouldn't hide either. I was good at doing what came easy and passively deferring to a heteronormative culture, but I was not man enough to be myself.
I worked with the Wisconsin Badger football team for 5 years as an undergraduate student. We had an offensive lineman who suffered from depression while a player. He was a redshirt junior when I was just a freshman. For the most part, he kept his feelings and his issues to himself, not seeking the help of teammates, coaches, or counselors. He suppressed his feelings and only furthered the damaging effects of his depression as he kept himself within his man box. His position coach, who never strayed outside of his own man box, rarely ever praised his players and constantly belittled them, even after great performances. This coach carried himself without any compassion or perceived emotional connection to his players. As a result of his depression, the player quit from the football team after that season, as well as the track and field team, where he participated in field events during the spring season. He had given up his favorite sports that he was successful at simply because he was stuck inside of the man box and not seeking that emotional help or support he needed. The man box drove him into giving up on being a Division I, two-sport scholarship athlete. The man box that this player fell into caused him to let down his teammates, leaving a void on the teams he was a part of. Not only did his man box prevent him from enjoying his senior seasons, but it hurt his teams in their future successes. You could easily say that his position coach, who lacked any empathy or compassion while immersed in his own man box, helped to drive my friend deeper and deeper into the man box that he had woven for himself. His coach caused my friend's depression to reach unhealthy levels. The man box of unhealthy masculinity caused a coach to eventually drive his player to quit, and the player's man box caused himself to fall short of being there for his brothers on both teams. Because men don't talk about their feelings or emotions with each other, because it's a sign of weakness and instability.
I grew up in the inner city of Milwaukee, the son of a single mother and into a family with a strong matriarchal presence. My mother gave birth to me at the young age of 18. I recall how hard she would work every day, sometimes working 2 jobs at a time, just to provide a home for us, clothes, and to ensure there was always enough food to eat. My mom was and still is my superhero. She made raising me her #1 priority, and in spite of our circumstances, she somehow was able to juggle being a mother, working a full-time job, and she even furthered her education, going on to earn an associate's degree and ultimately her bachelor's degree when I was 10 years old. With the help of my grandmother and a host of aunties, both blood and non-blood, I never wanted or lacked for the things I needed in life to be successful. Simply put, these strong Black women invested in me to ensure I would never become the stereotypical Black male we often see portrayed in America. You see, like many African American boys, my father was not around to help me grow and develop into a young man. And because of that, my mother and the other women in my life assumed a role they should never have had of raising a boy into a man. This is no easy task. As a child, I was thought to be more sensitive than the average kid. I was especially more sensitive than what a boy should be according to the social norms of the time. It did not take much to bring tears to my eyes, and I did not really enjoy playing sports like most other little boys. Since I was more comfortable being around women, I would often seek out the companionship from girls in my classes, or I would stay close to my female teachers. This also meant I spent a lot of time doing things girls did more than doing things boys did. People often called me soft. They said I was a sissy for hanging out with girls. And my peers, as well as adults, teased me for being girly. Usually, when a man showed any interest in me, it was only to toughen me up so I could be like a man. At some point, I became aware of what others thought of me, and I felt ashamed. So naturally, I began to act more manly by hanging out with boys and doing things and saying things boys would do, even if I didn't agree with it.
Two years ago, I sat in the back of the assembly for this session, and I listened to some amazing young men, several of whom you've already heard tonight, share their experiences with this thing known as the man box. Their words struck a chord with me. I'd seen similar things in my life, but this was the first time I was able to recognize them for what they were. I'm grateful to have been asked to share my experiences with you from the perspective of a veteran, an older man, and someone who's experienced the man box through 3 generations. My father was a World War II veteran with 2 years of almost continuous combat in the Pacific. Like many veterans of that war, he never spoke about his wartime experiences. He held everything inside himself, just like a real man should do. And he just wanted to get back to a normal life. Dad rarely showed his emotions, and he wasn't really outwardly affectionate, although I respected him a lot, and he was a great father. He worked a full-time job and then came home and worked on the farm, usually until after dark. Again, I think his actions and lifestyle were typical of combat veterans who return home. In fact, this is typical of combat veterans who return home now, veterans who are not much older than you are. But looking back, there are times I remember his words and actions showing what he believed a real man really was. One day I told him my music instructor at high school thought I should study music in college. His reply to me was something like, "There's no way I'm going to tell my friends my son is a musician." I really kind of wanted to be, but fortunately my lack of any real musical talent avoided any future discussion of a career in music. So let's fast forward to December 23rd, 2007. I'm visiting my dad at our farm in Pennsylvania. Mom had died in 1998, and Dad had had a stroke and heart attack a few years earlier. He'd been receiving dialysis treatments 3 times a week, and he showed the physical stress of his condition. So we sat at the kitchen table, which we did most nights when I was visiting. He suddenly began talking about his World War II experiences. Not the ones about basic training that he'd sometimes mention, but brutal and vivid discussions of combat, death, and other experiences too horrific to mention. I sat in awe as my dad told us seeing men die, seeing tortured and mutilated bodies, and losing close friends. He spoke for several hours. At first I sat there and I got to tell you, I was a little angry at him, wondering why this was the first time he was telling me about it. But then I realized that he'd been blocking those memories for 60 years. And I quickly understand the burden he was relieving from his very soul. And for the first time in my life, I saw my dad cry, and I cried with him. He'd finally broken out of his box and shared what he truly felt. It was the closest moment I ever had with him. 1 month later, he had a heart attack and yet another stroke. His mind and body were quitting on him. I truly believe that the month before that, he had sensed his body was about to fail him, and he opened up his soul to me. Now, because of a quick onset of dementia, I never had another real conversation with my dad. But I have that one night when he showed me what a real man really was.
The ninth grade students we spoke about earlier from Appleton North, who gave their responses on what it meant to them when they heard the phrase, be a man, also responded to the question of what healthy masculinity meant to them as well. Here's a sample list of what they generated that day. Do you notice the difference? Healthy masculinity means so much more to them than what the stereotype of masculinity provides. Let's hear how these men transition from the man box experiences they just spoke about into the healthy lives of masculinity that they lead today.
"13 months later, my dad died. During that time, I made a number of trips back to Pennsylvania to see him, but my son Mark had really taken responsibility for watching over the family farm. Mark lived just 5 miles away from the farm in the same town where I grew up. A few months after the funeral, I returned to Pennsylvania to preside over the auction of the property. One thing I decided to do was have a private evening with my son Mark. You see, I didn't see Mark regularly as he was growing up because his mother and I had divorced, and I continued a 26-year career in the Air Force, traveling regularly and never really living very close to Pennsylvania. Mark and I do, however, share a common condition. It's known as Tourette's syndrome. Mine is very mild, but Mark's is a little more severe, with bouts of body twitches, facial tics, and sometimes verbal outbursts. I knew it affected him, but really didn't know the true extent of how much it affected him throughout his life. Because you see, I've always been a lot like my dad. I hold things inside and I try to bottle up my emotions. I was worried that Mark sensed that I didn't care for him as deeply as a dad should. The times I had spent with him when he was growing up were focused on having fun together during the limited time we shared. And in many ways, I didn't even know the type of person that he'd grown into. Deep down, I believed I'd failed him. So during our evening, Mark talked a little bit about his time in school and how sometimes the kids would tease him and make comments. He wasn't a great student or a great all-around athlete, although he was very good on the soccer field. He told me one day his Tourette's was getting the best of him, and some of the kids were making fun of him. At soccer practice, his coach pulled him aside to find out what was bothering him. The coach gave him some great advice that he still uses to this day. He told him that his Tourette's syndrome was really his secret radar, that he could always tell who his real friends were because they wouldn't be making fun of him. He told me he always thought that he had disappointed me because he wasn't a great athlete or student and his condition kept him from joining the military. For once I learned a lesson. Remembering the lesson I learned from my dad, I opened up and told him where I thought I had failed in life, where I thought I had failed him. I also told him how proud I was of the person he had become and the father that he had become. Over the years, I've shared my dad's story with a number of people, but this is only the second time I've spoken of that evening with my son. The first time was last year at Badger Boys State. So thank you for letting me step out of the box for a few minutes. I couldn't think of a better group of men to share my story with.
As I grew up, it became a challenge, trying to be someone I simply was not. Hard as I tried to dress, talk, and think like other boys did my age, I never felt comfortable in my own skin. I began building up walls, never really sharing with anyone, especially another man, the real me. If I cried or showed any weakness, I did so only at night in the privacy of my bedroom. I began to feel depressed and that life was worthless. Surely, no one cared enough for me to want to know the real me. So why should I go on living, I thought. This changed when one day I had a genuine conversation with a good friend of mine about life and the consequences of decisions we make. We talked about things we would have never discussed in the presence of our other male friends. He confided in me his regret for the way he treated and used women. And I shared with him that I had never actually gone to first base with a girl before. In turn, he told me how much he admired me from being different from our other friends. Hearing him say this to me was the first step in a long process, feeling like I was man enough just being me. From there, I went on to meet and interact with other men, some of whom are here tonight, who did not want to change me, but rather engaged me where I was. They showed me being a man is multifaceted. It's not about how many girls you can smash or keeping your emotions bottled up until you explode in some unhealthy manner. Being a man is being open first with yourself and then with others, so that we all can grow and develop together in authentic manhood.
When I was in 4th grade, my parents, like so many others, got divorced. My dad and I had always been very close, having spent my summers and most weekends hunting, fishing, or working construction with him. Even as a kid, it was apparent that the divorce was very hard on him. He had always been very close with me, but I wouldn't say that we were commonly sharing deep emotions together and covering issues beyond those that were just scratching the surface. One night after hockey practice, my dad and I were in the kitchen, and he suddenly started bawling. My always strong and steady father was bawling like a little kid. The man that had survived death in an ambulance, had hunted Alaska in the mountains, and fallen in rivers as a fur trapper, was as weak and as vulnerable as I had ever seen. Ever since that night, he has been open with me about some of his deepest feelings and emotions, things that aren't necessarily common between a father and a son. His leaving the constraints of his man box helped to teach me to do the same as I struggled from the divorce to open up emotionally. The warmth, the reassurance, and the comfort that compassion and courageous vulnerability can instill was building a foundation for me to be an emotionally healthy man as I grew up, laid down for me by my father. His act, which was of confident vulnerability and strength, not weakness and fragility, fostered my growth and development to healthy masculinity. Before, I had been burying most of my issues and had always tried to keep even-keeled. Although my transition was slower and took many years, I couldn't help but find that event, which is still ingrained in picture in my memory, to have been a major turning point in our relationship, not only in our relationship, but in my growth into adulthood. Without that, I can confidently say that I wouldn't be as willing and able to deal with emotional stress and events as if I were still stuck within the confines of the man box, because men express and face their emotions head on with the help of the support structure that they establish in their life.
Coming out is often depicted in movies and on TV as a specific moment in time, Prior to that moment, the story goes, an individual is straight. After coming out, they're gay. But as most LGBT people will tell you, coming out is an ongoing process. For me, that process began with one trusted friend when I was 21. Right after I graduated college, I went on to tell my sister, Erin. Over the course of that summer, I began telling some more of my closest friends. And this process continued on for another 4 years. This period of time presented me with its own set of challenges. Who had I already told? Who didn't know? If I hadn't told one of my friends yet, why not? Were we really even friends if I couldn't tell them? I felt anxiety and guilt about the way that others saw me because I thought it was all a facade. I was hiding, but I knew my mental health would deteriorate if I tried to hide forever. So I made a plan to come out. My biggest fear about coming out was that my parents would abandon me and my friends would disown me. That would be the worst case scenario. But remembering my plan to build up a network of supporters first, I began telling the friends whom I trusted the most. The talks were difficult, in some cases awkward, and in every case tearful. The general reaction from my friends was one of surprise, but ultimately support. In fact, my friendships were overall strengthened because I no longer felt as though I had to hide. My plan had worked. And then it was time for the most difficult conversation of all. I was determined to tell my parents. I had never heard them say anything offensive about LGBT people, but I had also never heard them say anything positive either. It was the summer of 2016. I was 24 years old, and it was time for Badger Boys State. I live in Minneapolis, so I always stopped to visit my parents on the way to and from Ripon. As a result, I knew that my car would already be packed with all my belongings. I knew that if I needed to, I could leave their house in a hurry. Throughout the entire drive home to Black River Falls, all I could think about was the fact that this might be the last visit to my childhood home if they disowned me. It tore me up. I couldn't bring myself to tell them in person, so I decided to write them a letter. I left it on my bed and I drove back to Minneapolis. As I drove north, the rain poured down, covering the road and filling the ditches. There was a faint glint of sunlight trying to show through, but the June storm continued to roll. After what seemed like days of driving, I arrived back at my apartment and waited for my phone to ring. I knew that sooner or later, my mom would go into my room to check for laundry and tidy up like she always did. She would be the one to find the letter. As I sat waiting, the text messages came through, one right after another. First was my mom. I love you, I have always loved you, and I will always love you, no matter what. Then was my dad. I love you so much, and you will always be my son. Please come home when you can. I want so much to hug you and let you know that I support you. It was Martin Luther King Jr. who said, "In the end, we will remember not the words of our friends, but the silence of our enemies." It's not always the comments that hurts the most, it's the passivity. To me, being a man means having the confidence and the courage to be myself. It means being the type of person who others look up to as a role model, and it means calling people out when they're being disrespectful. It means being vulnerable and allowing others to be vulnerable too. But most importantly, it means being a kind and compassionate ally to a person in need. As we enter these last few days of the program and you eventually start your senior year, my challenge to you is to lead with compassion, be vulnerable, listen, and treat others with respect. That, to me, is healthy masculinity.
Stop crying. Stop with the tears.
Don't cry.
Pick yourself up. Stop with the emotion.
Don't be a pussy. Don't let nobody disrespect you.
Be cool and be kind of a dick.
Always keep your mouth.
Nobody likes a tattletale.
Bros come before hoes.
Don't let your woman run your life.
You a bitch.
What a fag.
Get laid. Do something.
Be a man.
Be a man.
Grow some balls.
The three most destructive words that every man receives when he's a boy is when he's told to be a man.
We've constructed an idea of masculinity in the United States that doesn't give young boys a way to feel secure in their masculinity, so we make them go prove it all the time.
Within their peer group culture, each of them is posturing based on how the other boys are posturing, and what they end up missing is what they each really want, which is just that closeness.
In good times, guys are like really close to each other, but when things get a little bit worse, you're on your own.
From middle school, I had 4 really close friends. Once I kind of went into high school, I struggle finding people I can talk to because I feel like I'm not supposed to get help.
Our kids get up every morning. They have to prepare their mask for how they're gonna walk to school. A lot of our students don't know how to take the mask off. What is it you don't let people see? Almost 90% of you have pain and anger on the back of that paper.
If you never cry, then you have all these feelings stuffed up inside of you, and then you can't get them out.
They really buy into a culture that doesn't value what we've feminized. If we're in a culture that doesn't value caring, doesn't value relationships, doesn't value empathy, you are going to have boys and girls, men and women go crazy.
I had anger issues in high school. I felt like an outcast.
I've been suspended at least once every year I was here. We would just look for trouble and just like try to fight.
Boys are more likely to act out. They're more likely to become aggressive. Most people miss that as depression or see it as a conduct disorder or just a bad kid.
I felt like just giving up on life. You know, I actually had suicide thoughts in my head at 6th grade.
I felt alone for a long time, and I actually thought about killing myself.
Whether it's homicidal violence or suicidal violence, people resort to such desperate behavior only when they are feeling shamed and humiliated or feel they would be if they didn't prove that they were real men.
If you're told from day one, don't let nobody disrespect you, and this is the way you handle it as a man, respect is linked to violence.
If I can man up, why step down from that, you feel me?
It's like instinct.
So man up. Man up. Man up. Man up. Hold some fucking balls. Act like a man. Be a man.
Be a man.
For my kids, I was going to end this hyper-masculine narrative here.
Be a man. The 3 most destructive words that any man will ever hear. And for me, those words were yelled at me most often while my cleats were dug firmly into the football field, as I had mentioned earlier. The man up mindset was the life I led for many years. As the seasons of football passed, I soon found myself under center as quarterback at Appleton North my freshman year. It wasn't until I had been hurt quite severely that season for me to realize what I had become. As a leader, I was giving vision and guidance to my team under principles that surely did not promote individual growth. My passion for the game was easily misinterpreted as anger, as that was the only emotion that I understood. My inability to understand and appreciate the abilities outside of the man box that many of the men on my team possessed surely was a detriment to the overall success of our team that season. As leaders, it was and is our responsibility to step outside of the man box and lead a life of healthy masculinity away from telling people to man up and to be tough. As leaders, we cannot continue to propagate these theories of what being a man that society has placed on our shoulders. It will be on us as leaders, as change makers, as policy developers of tomorrow to lead this change in what it actually means to be a man. Individually, these characteristics are not bad, and I cannot stress that enough. These joys found within the man box, individually, they are all right. Such as driving a truck, eating those greasy cheeseburgers. That's all right, and we cannot forget that. But when you can't remove yourself from the box and allow yourself to eat that salad or drive the car instead of the truck, or you won't allow yourself to cry when you need to express emotion for fear of what others may think of you, if they may think that you're not a man because of it, that's when it's time for a change. I dare you to hold each other accountable this week and with your friends back at home on striving towards leading a life of healthy masculinity and stepping outside of the man box. And in closing, I'd like to leave you with this.
I be a man
whose confidence comes from the depth of my giving,
who understands that vulnerability is my greatest strength,
who creates space rather than dominates it,
who appreciates listening more than knowing,
who seeks kindness over control,
who cries when the grief is too much.
A usar un arma, ahorcar e insultar.
May I not be afraid to get lost.
May I cherish touch more than performance.
And the experience more than getting there.
May I be brave enough to share my fear and shame.
And gather the other men to do the same.
May I stop pretending and open the parts of me that have long been numb.
May I cherish, respect, and love my mother.
May the resonance of that love translate into loving all women and living things.
Love.
Badger boys, stand up to this world. Take a chance. Show emotion other than anger, and be the leaders that drive change in your communities. Thank you.
Tonight, I want to take a few minutes to share a memory about a man who was important in my life and to this program. Teddy Duckworth joined the Marines and served his country for over 5 years, completing 2 extended tours in Vietnam as a helicopter mechanic, crew chief, and door gunner. Teddy was my friend and a mentor to me, and I met him 19 years ago when I was sitting in your seats as a citizen. He was my city councilor. When I first met Teddy, I looked at this old man in a funny cap, and I thought, what could he possibly teach me? It didn't take long for me to discover how wrong I was in that judgment. Teddy was the type of person who always had something positive to say. Every time he saw me, he encouraged me. And every year I returned to the counseling staff here at BBS, he would continue to encourage me and tell me how proud he was of me. I miss Teddy dearly, but I will never forget I will never forget his generous spirit, and I hope to forward his legacy by doing the same.
A year after my boys' state year, I had the honor and privilege to work as an assistant city councilor with Teddy in the city of Smith, Doolittle County. When I first met Teddy, I had a similar reaction to Derek. I was uncertain how a man nearly 3 times my age was going to relate to citizens. After one conversation, I knew how, and an instant bond was formed. The conversation wasn't long or memorable, other than he was able to say a lot with only a few words. Honestly, he would have rather listened. He commanded a room and was able to draw out the most incredible stories from even the shyest of guys. He encouraged everyone to tell their stories and had several amazing stories of his life and service to share as well. Throughout the past 18 years, Teddy genuinely cared about me and my life. He never judged me for my mistakes and only encouraged me to learn and grow from them. I learned a lot from Teddy. The many things he instilled in me, I carry with me. They have shaped me into the man I am today. He had an incredible passion for the people in his life, and especially for this program. I'm truly grateful for his commitment and service to our country, his commitment and passion for this program, and especially for his friendship, for ours will always be. It is my commitment to my friend that his stories will carry on through me as long as I shall live, and am able to forward his legacy.
Thank you, gentlemen, for that program. At this time, that concludes our presentation tonight, but please be seated for some further announcements.
Before I give my announcements, let's give the guys that came here tonight to share their stories one more round of applause. We have a couple of logistical things before we dismiss. The following students that I'm going to call the names of, I'd like to have you just meet in the back corner right over there. I'm going to put you in teams right off the bat. If you just meet in the back corner right over there. Cade Kimball, Ethan Wilkins, Zachary O'Connor, Gary Salmelea, Dustin Van Linehan, Timothy Weiss. You'll be the Alliant team back there. Cameron Manning, Zachariah Younger, Connor Dijak, Bryce DeRocher, John Siebold, Creed Kang, Jonathan Wright, Dylan Pierce, and Ryan Zickert. Your team Sub-Zero. It's cool, isn't it? And finally, the venture team, Teague Peterson, Bill Goon, I'm so sorry, Altar Garella, Hans Purish, Noah Freight, Luca Lopez, and Henry Vaness, your team venture in the back. And also, all of you that have been elected as your nominees for state positions, you're going to meet with Gary Williams in that back corner back there. So all of you that were called out earlier today when we were at our state photos, back corner over there with Gary Williams. Gentlemen, thank you for your attention tonight. We will dismiss by counties going forward here. So, which county are you guys? Mitchell County. If you would make your way out. And what county are you guys over here?